Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing at the edge of a lagoon so vast it could swallow city blocks. The water is mirror still, reflecting hundreds of white palaces that seem to glow against the twilight sky. The air hums with something humanity has barely learned to control: electricity. 10,000 lights flicker to life simultaneously, transforming night into an artificial day. You hear the distant music of a carousel, the thunder of water from massive fountains, and the collective gasp of 100,000 people seeing the future for the first time. This is not a dream. This is not a fantasy. This was real. Welcome to Chicago, 1893. Welcome to the White City. And 6 months after it opened, they burned almost all of it to the ground. The year is 1890. Chicago is a city with something to prove. Just 19 years earlier, the Great Chicago Fire had turned the heart of the city into ash. 100,000 people were left homeless. 3 square miles of buildings, gone in a single night. But Chicago didn't die. It rebuilt, faster, taller, stronger. By 1890, it had become the second largest city in America, a roaring engine of stockyards, railroads, and raw ambition. And then Paris happened. In 1889, France hosted the World's Fair and unveiled the Eiffel Tower, a monument so audacious it seemed to mock the rest of the world. Top that, it said. America wanted the next World's Fair, and Chicago wanted it more than anyone. When the United States Congress chose Chicago over New York to host the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus arriving in the Americas, the city had just 2 years to build something that would eclipse Paris. Not just eclipse it, humiliate it. The problem? The site they chose was swampland, muddy, desolate, and utterly unusable. Jackson Park, on the south side of the city, was 700 acres of marshes and sand. Most architects would have called it impossible. But Chicago hired a man named Daniel Burnham. Burnham didn't just want to build a fair, he wanted to build a vision, a gleaming, classically inspired city of the future, a place so beautiful it would make people weep. He called it the White City, and somehow, against every odd, in just 24 months, he and his team did exactly that. It's May 1st, 1893. Opening day. You step off the Illinois Central Railroad at the 65th Street station and walk through the gates of the World's Columbian Exposition. The first thing that strikes you isn't a building, it's the light. Everything is white. Not painted wood, but staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and fibers that can be molded into any shape. 200 buildings, all gleaming in neoclassical splendor, all covered in this brilliant white material. You walk down the Grand Court, and ahead of you stretches the Court of Honor, a massive basin of water flanked by palaces. The buildings rise 6-7 stories tall, covered in columns, arches, domes, and sculptural details that would take a lifetime to appreciate. At the center of it all stands the Statue of the Republic, a 65-foot golden goddess holding a staff and a globe, towering over the water like a vision from ancient Rome. To your right is the Manufactures and Liberal Arts Building. It is the largest building ever constructed at this point in history. You could fit the United States Capitol, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Winchester Cathedral, and Madison Square Garden inside it, all at once, and still have room left over. The roof is pure glass, supported by iron arches. Inside, sunlight pours down on exhibits from 72 countries. You see Persian carpets, German machinery, French porcelain, Japanese silk. You see a map of the United States made entirely of pickles. You step outside and the late afternoon sun is beginning to set. Then it happens. With the pull of a single switch by President Grover Cleveland, 10,000 incandescent lights ignite across the fairgrounds. The White City becomes the City of Light. This is the first time most Americans have ever seen electric illumination on this scale. The buildings glow. The fountains, lit from below, seem to dance with liquid fire. The lagoons reflect 1,000 shimmering stars. People stand frozen. Some cry. Others fall to their knees. One visitor will later write, "I felt as though I had been transported to heaven." But the White City isn't the whole story. If the Court of Honor represents humanity's highest aspirations, then the Midway Plaisance represents everything else: spectacle, commerce, curiosity, and something darker: exploitation. The Midway is a mile-long strip of entertainment stretching west from the main fairgrounds. It's loud, chaotic, and filled with attractions designed to shock and amaze. At the center of it all stands George Ferris's wheel. It is 264 feet tall. Each of its 36 cars can hold 60 people. The wheel rotates slowly, lifting passengers high above the fair, giving them a view of the entire White City and the glittering expanse of Lake Michigan beyond. It is an engineering marvel built for one reason: to prove that America could out-engineer the Eiffel Tower. But the Midway also has a troubling side. Scattered among the rides and restaurants are the so-called ethnographic villages, recreations of life in Africa, the Middle East, and the Pacific Islands, populated by real people brought to Chicago and put on display. These exhibits were designed to show progress, to demonstrate how civilization looked compared to the primitive world. It was a vision of the world built on hierarchy, imperialism, and racism, and it was wildly popular. The Midway was where America came face to face with the rest of the world, but only on its own terms, through its own lens, with its own prejudices firmly intact. While millions marveled at the White City, something monstrous was happening just a few blocks away. His name was H. Holmes. Holmes had built a hotel near the fairgrounds, a building that would later be called the Murder Castle. It had soundproof rooms, hidden staircases, gas chambers, and a basement incinerator. He lured young women to his hotel with promises of work at the fair. Many of them were never seen again. Estimates vary, but Holmes may have killed as many as 200 people during the 6 months the fair was open. While the world gazed at the future, evil was hiding in plain sight. And there was another shadow over the fair: economic collapse. Just weeks after the fair opened, the Panic of 1893, one of the worst financial crises in American history, swept the nation. Banks failed. Railroads went bankrupt. Unemployment soared. Visitors still came to the fair, but many could barely afford the 50-cent admission. The White City was a fantasy, but outside its gates, America was burning. On October 30th, 1893, the fair closed its doors. Over 27 million people had visited, nearly half the population of the United States at the time. They had seen the future. They had tasted chocolate from the first Hershey exhibit. They had ridden the Ferris wheel. They had walked through palaces that seemed to belong to gods. And then they went home. The White City was never meant to last. The buildings were made of temporary materials. The plan was always to tear them down. But on July 5th, 1894, fire broke out in the casino building. The blaze spread quickly, consuming structure after structure. By the time it was over, most of the White City was reduced to ash and rubble. Some claimed it was arson. Others said it was inevitable. A city built of plaster and dreams was always going to burn. Today, almost nothing remains. The Museum of Science and Industry, once the Palace of Fine Arts, is the only major building still standing. A few statues were relocated. Some columns were saved, but the Court of Honor, the Manufacturers Building, the Grand Basin, the Golden Republic, all of it is gone. Chicago in 1893 was a city that dared to dream impossibly big. For 6 months, it created something more beautiful than anything America had ever built. It showed the world what the future could look like, a place of light, wonder, and limitless possibility. But it also revealed the contradictions at the heart of that dream. inequality, exploitation, and the fragility of beauty built on borrowed time. The White City is gone, but its ghost still haunts us. Because every time we build something magnificent and temporary, every time we reach for the future only to watch it slip away, we are standing once again on the shores of that lagoon, watching the lights flicker on, knowing they won't last forever. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the most beautiful things are the ones we know we're going to lose.
But there's something deeper behind the story of the White City. It reveals a fundamental principle of human psychology and progress. People don't just build structures, they build visions of the future. And those visions are rarely meant to last. They are meant to inspire. The White City was not just an engineering project. It was a psychological experiment, proof that when people are shown what is possible, their expectations of reality permanently change. Modern cities, urban planning, electrical infrastructure, and even the idea of organized public space, all of it was influenced by what people experienced in Chicago in 1893. In science, this is often described as a reference point shift. Once humanity sees a higher standard, it can no longer return to the old one. The White City burned, but the idea of the future it created did not. And that is how progress really works. Not through what survives, but through what changes the way we think.